Hi everyone, my name is Abhiraj Garakapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Apai.
Don't just hear the story, enter it.
Compare a new list with the old one side by side. They should be able to identify inconsistencies and detect potential threats. That kind of information would definitely be useful for them later. Fortunately, the rest of the club agrees with him immediately, so he does not need to explain further for now. The Academy's faculty data is automatically updated every month, and a large portion of data is removed during each update. For someone living in the world of blessing of miracle, this would seem strange. But Geoma understands the real reason. It mirrors how the game performs optimization updates to reduce storage size. Ironically, this makes it easier to identify irregularities and track down suspicious individuals. Even though many things have already changed, Geoma realizes that his knowledge as a former player still holds value. For now, all they need to do is wait for Ryoso to gather the new information. However, Geoma also realizes that he has been relying on Ryoso for many things recently. Despite everything she does for him, he has nothing to offer her in return. He wonders what he could possibly give to someone who is the daughter of Japan's permanent Prime Minister. He decides to ask her if there is anything she wants, but Ryoso refuses to say what kind of favor she will ask for in return. The following day, Ryoso returns with a large stack of documents for them to review. She has printed out detailed faculty records, including any suspicious movements, though she has not analyzed them yet. The information is incredibly thorough. It even includes how many times each faculty member went to the bathroom. While this level of detail clearly invades privacy, they need to examine everything carefully if they want to uncover important clues. Besides, once they are finished, they plan to destroy all the data so that nothing can be traced back to them. It helps that Chloe is an assassin, and Ryoso is willing to do whatever it takes to achieve her goals, meaning neither of them is particularly concerned about moral boundaries. At the same time, Speed Weapon helps keep things from going too far. The only person Geoma remains uncertain about is the new member, Sunhana. After the group encourages each other and prepares to begin, Hana raises her hand and asks where Geoma obtained all this information. He has been avoiding that question because he cannot reveal that he knows Choi Sola or that the villains are targeting Leon Van Reinhardt. Explaining everything would only create confusion and take far too long. On top of that, if Chloe found out, she would likely try to kill the instructor the next time they met. Geoma tells them that he cannot explain right now, but they should trust that the information he provided is reliable. When the time comes, he promises that he will tell them everything they need to know. Even though his answer is vague, Hana simply smiles at him for a moment before they continue their work. Once again, she reminds him of someone, but he still cannot figure out who it is. After spending some time going through the files, Geoma pauses to take a short break and Chloe walks over to him with some water. He tells her not to worry too much about how things are progressing, reminding her that she is already contributing a lot and helping in ways that the others cannot. It is clear that Chloe had started to feel a bit self-conscious, so his reassurance helps lift her out of that state. Not long after that, Geoma receives a notification stating that he has been assigned to a group with Sunhana. While Rachel will be acting as the group leader, Geoma lets out a long, tired sigh, already imagining how exhausting this arrangement will be, though he reassures himself that things should be manageable since Hana will also be there. Ironically, Ryoso then reveals that she has been placed in a group led by Leon Van Reinhardt, which causes Geoma to chuckle in amusement. Later that day, once the group finishes their meeting, everyone leaves, leaving only Hana and Ryoso behind in the room. Hana prepares to leave as well, but Ryoso stops her and places a document on the table. At the very top of the list, Hana's name appears as a member of the faculty staff. With that evidence in front of her, Ryoso demands to know who Hana really is. She points out that Hana's personality is too well balanced and that she rarely speaks much or expresses her own opinions, which makes her suspicious. Despite Ryoso's confidence, Hana simply starts laughing, which completely throws Ryoso off. Then she points at the document and explains that the person Ryoso is accusing her of being just happens to share the same name as her. Not only that, but that person is currently on a work trip in America, meaning they are not even present at the academy. Ryoso briefly considers whether the data could have been tampered with, but quickly realizes that would be nearly impossible. The system automatically updates the data through the subspace system, and only Media would have the authority to alter it. As Ryoso's thoughts begin to spiral toward the possibility that even the principal could be involved, Hana calmly interrupts her, telling her to relax. She explains that in Korea, it is quite common for people to share the same name, so it is understandable that Ryoso would make that mistake. With the situation cleared up, Hana stands to leave, but before going, she gives Ryoso a piece of advice. If she wants to win over someone as oblivious as Juma, she will need to be more direct. That unexpected comment leaves Ryoso blushing intensely. Meanwhile, shifting focus back to Juma. In the early hours of the morning, he lies in bed thinking about the sudden changes to the exam. He does not have any issue with the changes themselves, but he cannot understand why, out of all people, Rachel ended up as the leader of his group. He does not dislike her, but she makes him feel uncomfortable. The reason for that discomfort is because, as a former player of Blessing of Miracle, he knows that Rachel's interest in him is not driven by love or romance. Instead, she is aiming to secure strong genetics for her bloodline. Ironically, despite that motive, she has never had a boyfriend, which creates a strange contradiction in her personality. Because of that, she ends up being the last heroine in the game that the player can form a genuine romantic relationship with. While he is lost in these thoughts, his phone suddenly vibrates with an incoming call from Ryoso. He answers it, wondering if something unusual has happened, or if she has discovered something important. Instead, Ryoso sounds slightly disappointed and asks if he really thinks she would only call him for something like that. Even though Gioma can be quite dense, it still feels unusual for her to call him at 5 in the morning, which is why he assumed it must be something important. Ryoso hesitates for a moment before simply wishing him good luck on the exams. Gioma responds by wishing her the same. After another brief and somewhat awkward pause, Ryoso thanks him and ends the call. The entire interaction leaves Gioma confused, but he does not have time to dwell on it. The sun has already begun to rise, and he needs to get ready for school. The exam is being held inside what appears at first glance to be just another school building. However, anyone who is familiar with it can immediately tell that the atmosphere around it feels completely different. The building is known as the Jokwon Academy Special Hall, a place designed to replicate the experience of baller Jokwon during the 20 years he spent in Jehana. It is essentially a perfect miniature recreation of that environment, except that it does not contain any monsters. Since the Academy places a strong emphasis on giving students practical, field-like experience, it is not surprising that the final exam is being conducted in a place like this. As Gioma walks through the halls, someone suddenly rushes up behind him. He turns just in time to see Rachel crash into him and wrap him in a tight hug. Instinctively, Gioma reaches for his knight, causing Rachel to immediately step back when she realizes just how dangerous he has become compared to before. Sanhana soon arrives after the commotion settles, holding a B-rank armament crowbar. Rachel immediately turns to scold her for being late, but Hana handles the situation calmly and easily, showing that she knows how to deal with Rachel's personality. Their conversation is interrupted when the instructors arrive at the staircase at the end of the hall. They call everyone's attention to explain the details of the special exam. The test is a team versus team event, where each group must pass through the hall's gate and reach a designated checkpoint within 1 hour. At first, it sounds like a simple race, which feels underwhelming for a final exam. However, the instructors clarify that the environment beyond the gate is a recreation of the demonic realm that Ballard Jokwon experienced. Inside this replica, there will be no subspace protection at all. Because of this, the use of weapons during the exam is strictly prohibited to prevent casualties. Additionally, each team will be assigned an instructor who will both evaluate their performance and intervene if necessary to avoid any dangerous situations. As the instructors move to their assigned groups, Gioma's team is unexpectedly paired with Instructor Kim. She visibly flinches in surprise, but quickly masks it by claiming that she only recognizes him because of his impressive subspace duel. Internally, however, she is panicking, terrified at the thought of being grouped with someone like him. Despite her attempts to stay composed, Rachel immediately takes a dislike to her, and the two begin arguing until it is finally time for everyone to enter the gate. On the other side, Rachel immediately begins to struggle as the environment starts affecting her directly. Instructor Kim does not even try to hide her satisfaction at seeing Rachel's discomfort. Even Jeoma feels a slight tingling sensation from the environment, though he is not heavily affected. Rachel, however, is extremely sensitive to mana, so the conditions are far more exhausting for her. At the current pace, they will not be able to handle whatever comes next. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pi grow naturally. Meanwhile, Choi Sabola, due to her high mana affinity, appears completely comfortable in this environment. Jeoma briefly considers whether she might be planning something, but as long as he holds her seal of subordination, there is very little she can do against him. Behind him, Hana also appears to be struggling, likely because she does not have a strong affinity for Hana either. It has only been 25 minutes since they entered, and they still have 35 minutes remaining. Given how much they are struggling, failure is becoming a real possibility. If Jeoma had his knife, he would at least be able to sense the flow of mana around him. However, without it, he needs to find another method. His attention turns toward Choi Samola, realizing that she can act as a substitute for detecting mana. Once he gives her the instruction, she immediately begins searching for mana, like a train tracker. He had not even meant it seriously when he thought of her as a mana-sniffing dog, but watching her now makes the comparison hard to ignore. Meanwhile, Rachel manages to steady herself and pushes forward with determination, moving ahead as if she is on a mission. It becomes clear that each of them is adapting in their own way. Hana also seems to recover slightly as they continue. As Rachel and Hana move ahead, Choi Samola leans closer to Jeoma and informs him that she can sense a concentrated source of mana toward the northwest. At this rate, they should reach the first checkpoint in about 10 minutes. Jeoma acknowledges her effort, and she responds with a cheerful salute, almost like a loyal subordinate. Even her behavior resembles that of a trained companion, but thanks to her ability, they are able to make steady progress. As they increase their pace and move toward their objective, Jeoma briefly wonders how the rest of his friends are managing in their own groups. Over with Rio's team, which is being led by Leon van Reinhardt. They have already been walking for 32 minutes and are currently in the lead. Leon can tell that they are getting close to the first checkpoint, but at that moment, one of their teammates begins to stagger and asks if they can take a short break. Rio's initially tries to encourage her to push forward just a little longer, but it quickly becomes obvious that the strange mana in the environment is affecting her badly as she starts coughing uncontrollably. Seeing her condition worsen, Rios turns to Leon and asks him to stop for a moment since their senior is clearly struggling. However, Leon has no intention of stopping. As the leader of the group, he believes that he has responsibilities to fulfill and a goal that must be achieved. Rios continues arguing with him, calling him out for choosing to move forward even while one of their teammates is suffering. Leon suddenly stops and turns to face her directly. He tells her that he has no intention of dragging along teammates who cannot trust him or follow his lead. He then adds that she should not expect him to act like Jeoma. Hearing Jeoma's name only makes Rios angrier, and she immediately demands to know why he even brought him up before the argument can escalate further. Their struggling teammate steps forward and insists that she will try harder. Their assigned instructor also speaks up, encouraging everyone to hold on just a little longer. With that, Rios has no choice but to continue moving forward, though she still finds herself thinking about Jeoma. Meanwhile, back with Jeoma's team, they have been traveling for nearly an hour, yet they have not encountered a single other group of cadets. The reason for this is similar to the uninhabited island survival training scenario. Each team was transported to a different starting point through subspace and is approaching the same checkpoint from different directions. However, the fact that they have not seen anyone at all also suggests that many teams may have already given up halfway through. Jeoma does not blame them, since without Choi Sa-la, his own team might have had to withdraw as well. He calls out to her and asks how participants are supposed to return if they decide to give up. In response, she pulls a device out of her jacket. It is called a mana collar. By pressing the button on it, the user's location will appear on the administration's monitoring screen. She explains that it is an educational tool developed by the Hero Association using a degraded artifact. Artifacts are remnants from the mythical age, containing power that goes beyond monetary value. There are fewer than 10 true artifacts in existence, and the Hero Association controls them to maintain balance among nations. However, degraded versions of these artifacts are now being distributed to organizations. Hearing this, Gyuma cannot help but think that this development does not sound like a good thing. Their discussion is suddenly interrupted when Rachel shouts that she has found the checkpoint. Choi Sol-ah glances back at Gyuma with a smug smile before heading over to congratulate Rachel. Having reached the checkpoint, they have successfully cleared the first stage. To proceed to the second stage, they must pass through a large, ominous door. Even Choi Sol-ah does not know what lies beyond it, but from what she can sense, the mana coming from the other side is so intense that it is distorting the surrounding space. Despite how ominous it appears, the next stage cannot begin until they go through the door. With that in mind, Rachel rushes forward excitedly and pushes the door open, eager to continue. However, instead of entering another room, she steps forward into empty space, nearly falling off a massive cliff. At the last second, Sanhana grabs her by the collar and pulls her back, saving her from falling to her death. Rachel immediately turns around and starts arguing with their instructor for not warning them about the danger ahead. Meanwhile, already inside the second stage, Leon Van Reinhardt's group continues moving forward through the dark and murky artificial Gehenna, where the ground is soaked with dirty water. His teammates begin to wonder if his fearless attitude comes from having experienced something like this before. However, their instructor can clearly tell that Leon is able to sense mana, which explains how confidently he is moving forward. At the same time, back in the first stage, two exhausted students struggle as they barely manage to reach the checkpoint leading into the second stage. Both of them are on the verge of collapsing, and they quickly apologize to their leader, Abel. Abel looks at the door ahead of them while thinking about what to do next. After a moment, she clenches her fist, realizing that pushing them any further would be reckless. She then turns to the instructor and asks them to officially record their forfeit. Outside in the main hall, Speed Weapon leans against a wall, struggling just to stay upright. The exam has been extremely harsh on him, and he even ended up throwing up the pizza he had eaten earlier that morning. Chloe runs over to him, having also failed the exam. Her team simply ran out of time, unlike Speed Weapon's team, which got eliminated after wandering around in circles. Both Gyuma and Ryozo are still inside the exam. While neither of them is particularly worried about Gyuma, they are genuinely concerned about Ryozo. Speed Weapon, in particular, worries about how she will handle being in a group led by Leon. To shift the mood, he suddenly suggests that he and Chloe should go hunt villains even though it is disappointing that they were eliminated so early. At least they can still do something useful for Gyuma. Back inside the second stage, Gyuma carefully guides his team through a steep and rocky path. Rachel suddenly takes the opportunity to jump onto his back in an ungraceful manner, but she immediately backs off when she senses his hostility. It seems that she has fully adapted to the environment now. Across from them, beyond a wide ravine, they can clearly see what appears to be the next checkpoint. Even though the destination is visible, they cannot afford to act recklessly since they have no subspace protection. Rushing ahead could be dangerous. Gyuma once again turns his attention to Choi Sol-ah, his so-called mono-sniffing dog. He has already relied on her once, so he sees no issue in doing it again. He approaches her and orders her to cross the bridge ahead of them first. Technically, this goes against the rules, but since they are not being actively monitored, it does not matter. Savola tries to object, saying that she cannot interfere because this is an exam, but that rest of the team sides with Gyuma. As she continues to resist, Gyuma steps closer to her while she lies on the ground. In a firm tone, he orders her once again to cross first and then promises that if she does it, he will grant her one wish, anything except removing her seal of subordination. That promise gives her enough courage to move forward. She steps onto the bridge and begins crossing. After making it partway, she suddenly freezes and collapses in fear, crying that she cannot continue. At that moment, she looks less like an instructor and more like a frightened child. Even so, thanks to her effort, the rest of them are able to follow safely. Gyuma walks up to her and praises her for doing a good job. His words have a deeper emotional impact on her than he expected, and she almost breaks. Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps amazing Abhai grow naturally. Down in tears before regaining her composure and continuing across the bridge. Rachel laughs at her sudden burst of determination and follows behind her. While Hana and Jiuma watch from behind, the two of them seem to have unexpectedly good chemistry, though Hana quietly thinks to herself that it is because Jiuma is a sinful man, a thought that Jiuma himself has no understanding of. Elsewhere, beyond the third gate known as the Tower of Ordeal, Leon's group has nearly reached the top. Even Ryoso is starting to feel exhausted at this point, and she begins to wonder what is driving Leon to push forward so relentlessly. After all, they have not encountered any other teams, so first place is practically guaranteed already. Behind her, their senior finally reaches her limit and collapses, completely drained of strength. Once again, Ryoso tries to convince Leon to slow down. This time, however, his response is much colder. He blames her for not being able to keep up with him. Everyone, including the instructor, is shocked by how harsh he sounds. That reaction seems to snap Leon back to his senses, and he quickly apologizes to Ryoso. He then suggests that they take a break on the 5th floor of the tower. He decides to go ahead and check the 5th floor first, while the rest of them rest and make their way up slowly afterward. Meanwhile, their senior lies on the ground, crying as she admits that she truly cannot continue any further, no matter how hard she tries. As the instructor attempts to encourage her, Ryoso kneels down and offers to carry her on her back. Since Ryoso can still move, this will allow the senior to rest. In truth, Ryoso herself is not in good condition either, and she never considered herself the kind of person who would go out of her way to help someone else. However, as the senior climbs onto her back and she begins to struggle under the added weight, she starts to realize that she may have changed more than she thought. Suddenly, both girls snap their gaze forward as they sense something ahead. At the exact same time, Jiuma also senses something and looks up toward the tower his team is about to enter. Rachel lightly teases him, saying he looks scared, and he brushes it off, but deep down, he knows that something has just happened. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor of the tower, two members of Leon's group collapse onto the ground, while a figure stands over them, holding a sword soaked in blood. Ryoso curls up in pain as her consciousness begins to fade, her blood pooling beneath her. The final thought that crosses her mind before everything goes dark is Jiuma. Meanwhile, Jiuma's group continued moving deeper inside, while he carefully scanned the surroundings. At some point, he noticed something strange. His senses felt much sharper than before. Up ahead, Choi-Sa-La reminded everyone that she would lead as the guiding instructor, while Hana cheered her on from behind, seeing Jiuma falling slightly behind. Rachel looked at him and asked if he could still climb the stairs. He simply nodded while observing the structure around them. The place looked like a separated section of the magic tower itself. His attention soon shifted to the stairs, where he noticed footprints left behind. That immediately told him another group had already passed through here during the exam, without anyone realizing it. Rachel kept complaining about how exhausting the endless stairs were, but Jiuma suddenly stepped on something sticky. Looking down, he discovered blood. Before anyone could react, a sharp scream echoed from above, making the entire group freeze. Rachel nervously asked what it was, but Jiuma had already dashed upstairs like the wind. Choi-Sa-La called out after him, before quickly telling the other two to stay behind. As Jiuma rushed upward, intense anxiety filled his mind. At the same time, countless fragmented images flooded Ryoso's thoughts. Slowly opening her eyes, she stared at her blood-covered hands in confusion. Her body trembled from the pain as she noticed the sword lodged in her chest. The blade was poisoned, and she immediately realized her condition was getting worse. When she looked ahead, she saw Leon fighting instructor Paul. At that moment, the truth became clear. Paul really was the undercover traitor they had suspected earlier. Their clash violently shook the area, and one of Leon's attacks completely shattered the wall behind Paul. Watching this, Paul admitted Leon truly deserved his title as a hero candidate. But the moment Paul noticed something strange, Leon suddenly appeared behind him. Before Leon could finish the attack, a hand pierced straight through his abdomen, and tore out from his side. It was the blue-haired girl from earlier. She mocked him, saying that even a hero candidate was still just human. She then turned toward Paul and commented that the others still seemed inexperienced at controlling Lord Permer's power. Paul apologized to Irit, while she calmly examined Leon. Honestly, he did not look worthy enough to become Lord Permer's vessel. She even wondered if Ager had really been defeated by someone like him. Paul, however, analyzed the situation differently. Leon had managed to survive this long in the demon realm without proper equipment, which already proved his ability. He speculated that Ager may simply not have been compatible with the body she possessed, with even the Sword Emperor involved. The story was probably true. Ario still seemed doubtful, but she knew there was no better vessel available. If Lord Permer successfully adapted to Leon's body, everything would work out perfectly. Paul is sure the results will be satisfactory. After all, Permer's is the one who took them under his wing after Ager's death. Just then, Ario's attention shifts towards Ryozo. Ario then turned toward Ryozo, who was trembling helplessly on the ground, and slowly walked closer. Noticing she was awake, Ario casually greeted her while Ryozo struggled to endure the unbearable pain. At that moment, only one thought filled her mind. She did not want to die like this. As her consciousness faded in and out, memories of her life surfaced. Everything had always felt empty to her. Every day was the same dull cycle, surrounded by a cold family and a meaningless existence with nothing she truly enjoyed. She never entered the academy because she dreamed of becoming a hero. Deep down, she had only wanted an excuse to die. Ario interrupted her thoughts and calmly asked how her performance had been. She admitted she had been worried about getting exposed, but thanks to the chaos Ryozo created herself, everything became much easier. Ryozo weakly questioned why she would do something like this. Ario laughed before answering honestly. She explained that she had always believed the two of them were alike. Ryozo's tired eyes and lifeless expression reminded her of someone who had already grown exhausted with life itself. While speaking, Ario cruelly twisted the sword lodged in Ryozo's chest, forcing out a painful scream. She confessed that she once intended to introduce Ryozo to Lord Permer after the mission was over, because she thought Ryozo was one of her own kind. But everything changed earlier when Ryozo tried to protect her, and even wanted to carry her on her back. To Ario, that moment proved Ryozo had become attached to humanity after all. In the end, she was still just another human, and that disappointed her deeply. Ario eventually decided the conversation had gone on long enough. There was no point hearing explanations from someone about to die. She coldly remarked that Ryozo would not feel lonely in death before turning around and walking away. Left behind with ragged breaths and fading strength, Ryozo clung desperately to one thing. For the first time in her life, she wanted to live over and over. That thought echoed in her head. She remembered the moment she had spent with Juma, and realized she had finally found a reason to keep living. Even though she believed there were no gods in this world, she still desperately prayed. Through her blurred vision, she suddenly heard approaching footsteps. Unconsciously, she whispered Juma's name and weakly reached out her hand, begging for help. Moments later, Juma finally arrived and froze completely at the horrifying sight before him. Ario looked toward Juma and mockingly called him a guest, just as Choi Saala rushed upstairs while calling his name. But the moment she arrived, she froze at the horrifying scene before her. Leon and Ryozo were both covered in blood, barely moving, and the entire area looked like a battlefield. She immediately wondered whether those two were even still alive. Before she could process everything, Ario casually greeted her like an old acquaintance. She offered Choi Saala a contract with Lord Permer, mentioning that after Ager's death, she had switched sides herself. Ario mocked her further, saying traders like her always needed a new master to serve, especially now that her mana was nearly exhausted. Hearing that only irritated Choi Saala more. The hypocrisy of being called a traitor by someone like Ario was almost laughable to her. Meanwhile, Ario stepped on Leon's head and warned Juma to stay out of this matter. She'd admitted it was impressive that he had defeated Ironleg, but then violently stomped Leon's face deeper into the ground. Even a hero candidate had ended up in this miserable state, so what could an ordinary human like Juma possibly do? She then shifted her attention back to Choi Saala and made her an offer for old-time sake. If she killed Juma right there, Ario would personally report her loyalty to Lord Permer. Her gaze moved toward Choi Saala's bag, as she pointed out the weapons hidden inside. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pi grow naturally. The offer immediately caught Choi Soala's attention, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. But before anyone realized what she was thinking, Jiyuma subtly gestured toward her as if asking for something. Then Choi Soala finally made her decision. Her expression hardened while purple mana glowed through her eyes. She instantly opened her bag, pulled out Jiyuma's weapon, and loudly called his name while rushing forward. The two villains watched with satisfaction, believing she had chosen their side. But their expressions completely changed in the next few seconds. Instead of attacking Jiyuma, Choi Soala suddenly knelt before him and offered him the sword. She declared that Jiyuma was now her new master. Ario's expression twisted in anger at the unexpected betrayal. At the same moment, Jiyuma grabbed the weapon, and the sword god's blessing surged through his body. His right eye turned bloodshot with fury as he stared directly at them, with killing intent overflowing from his voice. Jiyuma declared that he would cut them down. Paul stepped forward and declared that he would handle Jiyuma himself, while Ario reminded him not to kill Choi Soala. The moment Paul attacked, a violent blast of dust and smoke filled the area, but within the smoke, a sharp slash suddenly tore straight through it. Jiyuma effortlessly cut apart the dust cloud and calmly walked forward. Seeing that only excited Paul even more. Since Jiyuma had defeated Ironleg, Paul decided he would fight seriously from the start. Placing his hand on the ground, Paul began gathering mana from the tower itself. The environment was overflowing with magical energy, making it the perfect place to maximize his power. Soon, countless stones rose into the air and became engulfed in blazing flames. At Paul's command, they all shot toward Jiyuma at once. Explosions violently shook the entire area as the attacks rained down non-stop. Watching from behind, Choi Soala quickly realized what was happening. Through his new pact, Paul could now wield the powers of both Aegir and Permesh simultaneously. Paul confidently mocked Jiyuma, claiming a mere human should know there were limits he could never cross. But before he could finish speaking, a clean slash suddenly cut across his side. Paul instantly looked ahead, only to realize Jiyuma had vanished from sight. Another slash came from nowhere, forcing him back again. His frustration rapidly grew as Jiyuma continuously avoided his vision while striking from blind spots. Ario warned him to stay calm, but Paul had already lost his composure. In rage, he unleashed countless flaming stone attacks in every direction, determined to destroy the entire tower if necessary. Then, in a single instant, Jiyuma appeared in front of him again. The overwhelming killing intent radiating from him made Paul instinctively realize he might actually die. Yet Jiyuma's blade once again aimed toward his abdomen instead of his neck. That confused Paul. Jiyuma clearly had the skill to cut off his head, so why was he repeatedly targeting the same area around his ribs? Then his eyes shifted toward the collapsed Leon lying nearby with a wound through the center of his chest. At that moment, Paul realized Jiyuma had figured something out. Furious, Paul shouted that Jiyuma had been toying with him this entire time. His body suddenly began to twist and expand as violent energy erupted outward. Soon, he transformed into a massive purple demon Hulk monster, and roared loud enough to shake the tower itself. Both Choi Soala and Ario were visibly shocked by the transformation. Jiyuma, however, remained completely calm. Even while facing such a monstrous form, his expression never changed. Nothing about the creature in front of him seemed to matter. Paul raised his gigantic arm and swung downward with enough force to crush everything below him. But Jiyuma showed no fear at all. He simply stepped forward and delivered a single downward slash from above. The entire area suddenly fell silent. A moment later, Paul's massive body split cleanly into two before collapsing onto the ground. The power of Jiyuma's strike was so overwhelming that even the wall of the tower behind him had been sliced apart as well. Choi Soala stared at the scene in disbelief. Jiyuma could even use aura now. At that moment, she genuinely felt the safest place in the world was beside him. Aria, however, felt the exact opposite. Fear and frustration overwhelmed her as she looked at Jiyuma like he was some kind of monster. When she noticed him slowly walking toward her, panic immediately crept into her voice, as she warned him not to come any closer. But Jiyuma never stopped moving. His eyes had turned a blazing red, and the pressure around him no longer felt human. Aria could sense it clearly. To her, he looked more like a demon than anything else. As she stared at the glowing blade in his hand, Her thoughts spiraled into panic. She was going to die if she stayed there. Her mind desperately searched for a way out. If she could somehow survive and offer Leon's corpse to Lord Permersh, maybe that alone would satisfy the ritual. She tried thinking of escape methods. Running was impossible because he was far too fast. Using magic to blind him should have worked, especially in a place overflowing with mana like this tower. But suddenly she realized she could not sense any mana at all. Confused, Aria quickly understood the reason. The strange sashimi knife in Jivuma's hand was rejecting mana itself. In desperation, she grabbed Ryozo by the hair and threatened Juma. If he took another step forward, she would slit Ryozo's throat without hesitation. But even then, Juma continued advancing toward her without fear. Aria cursed in frustration, knowing she was running out of options. Then she suddenly noticed something strange. The dagger embedded in Ryozo's chest had disappeared. Before she could react, Ryozo weakly spoke from behind her. She told Aria to let go because it hurt. Then, without hesitation, Ryozo drove the dagger straight into Aria's chest. Aria stared at her in shock and rage, unable to believe she had been tricked. Ryozo smiled faintly and revealed that poison resistance was a natural trait of the Absolute Bo clan. Carrying the blood of her beloved did not make Aria immune to poison after all. In the end, Ryozo admitted she was disappointed in her too. As the poison spread through her body, Aria's strength completely disappeared. Her body collapsed to the ground like a puppet, with its strings cut, while she cursed Ryozo's name and disbelief. But Ryozo herself was already at her limit. Her body staggered weakly before collapsing as well. Juma immediately rushed forward and caught her before she hit the ground. Not long after, Rachel and Senhana finally arrived upstairs. The moment they saw Choice of Ola, they were about to speak, but she quickly signaled for silence. Meanwhile, Ryozo struggled to endure the pain while resting in Juma's arms. Weakly, she complained that his grip hurt before reminding him about the favor he had promised her a few days ago. She quietly asked him to stay with her for a little longer. After saying that, Ryozo's eyes slowly closed and she leaned on him. A few days later, the scene shifted to a quiet hospital room, where the steady beeping of a monitor echoed beside Ryozo's bed. Her fingers twitched slightly before her eyes slowly opened, still heavy with exhaustion. The moment Speed Weapon noticed she was awake, he immediately called out her name in relief, looking like he was about to collapse himself. Ryozo blinked in confusion, trying to process where she even was, while Speed Weapon let out a long sigh and told her she had been unconscious for over 3 full days. Hearing that instantly shocked her. 3 whole days had vanished just like that. As her memory slowly returned, pieces of the tower incident replayed in her mind, along with the pain, fear, and chaos from before she blacked out. Speed Weapon casually mentioned that she seriously owed the club president her life, because, according to Rachel, Jiguma personally treated both her and Leon's injuries with near-perfect first aid. He admitted he never even knew Juma had some kind of healing blessing, but even the doctors were shocked by how precise the treatment had been. The second Juma's name reached her ears, Ryozo completely froze. Then her face instantly turned bright red as she remembered all the embarrassing things she screamed at him before passing out. A second later, she completely exploded, clutching her head and screaming into the room from pure embarrassment. Speed Weapon nearly jumped out of his damn skin and immediately asked what the hell was wrong with her. Meanwhile, Ryozo's thoughts spiraled out of control as she kept repeating "no way" inside her head, wondering how she was ever supposed to face Juma. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Apai. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.